Yeah, her dad's a career New York State trooper, and then her uncle was a New York City firefighter. So the attacks happened. She had just started college, and her father and uncle are both down there at Ground Zero, trying to dig people out of the rubble for the first 3 or 4 days.
Man.
Yeah. So after that, her and her brother, a year younger than her, both do what a lot of Americans did at the time. And they went and found a recruiter, said they wanted to serve. So she knew she could learn languages pretty easily. That was like her passion. She taught herself Spanish and French and just had that mind that automatically gravitates toward languages. So she went to all the different recruiters and said, hey, I know I can learn Arabic, like put me in. And so the Navy was the first one that said, hey, we'll send you to DLI. If you can pass the test, we'll send you there. And so she, smoked her whatever it's called, D-Lab. Scored really high, great aptitude. So signed Navy contract, went to DLI, Defense Language Institute in Monterey it's like a year and a half to learn Arabic. It's like 18 months, I think, the initial Arabic training. So came out of that. She scored really well. But she never liked doing the easy thing. She had a passion for specifically the Iraqi dialect. Because, there's standard Arabic and then there's Iraqi, there's all the different dialects. So the Iraqi dialect's pretty challenging because it's so different than your traditional modern standard Arabic. So she latched onto that pretty quick and then volunteered for a deployment right away. And then her basically just going from being an individual augmentee to working at Siege Sodif to working down there at the Ville. She just kept kind of shining and making herself value added, that she eventually ended up on that same deployment. She ended up getting brought right down to Biop Airfield to work with the NSW Task Force that was down there because they wanted to bring in more intel people closer to them because they had the same frustrations that I had. Like, hey, we're not getting intel fast enough. So they started homegrowing some of their own intel capability. They brought her down there. And then on that deployment, she got an invite to go try out for the special reconnaissance teams for NSW because they had just opened that up to non-SEALs and to women as well. So she was in one of the first classes for the special reconnaissance troop.
Wow.
That let women in.
What year is this?
So that would be 07 or 08. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so you guys met in 07.
Yeah.
And then reconnected at what point?
2013, we both ended up going to selection for and getting invited to the year-long training course to be in a pretty unique special operations unit. Combines intelligence folks with special operators. Still one of the few units that not a lot's known about, so I'll be a little bit cagey and not talk too much about that unit. It's kind of funny because when you go and you do the for the book, you do the publication review stuff.
Yeah.
And the CIA is pretty cut and dry. Like, hey, you can say what you did at the CIA. They gave me one or two things I couldn't say, and then DOD's pages of don't say this, don't say that. So, yeah, but we both ended up there at that unit, and so we both recognized each other right away. But
Can I ask questions about that unit?
Sure. Yeah.
Just how did you get recruited into that?
So I was fortunate that on one of my deployments, I ended up working with them. So I kind of got exposed to what they were doing. And I already kind of gravitated towards that intel world. And so that's kind of where my head was. And I wanted at some point, I'd kind of set my sights on going to the agency next. Again, because I was interested in the intel side, but also I kind of wanted to be a voice of reason, I guess the way you could put it, somebody who had been there on the ground to actually give real information to decision makers so that we didn't ever get involved in a disaster like Iraq again. That was kind of my long-term goal. But I had an opportunity to work with some guys from that unit, and they had a pretty unique mission at the time. They were part of one of the task forces that was specifically going after just the foreign fighters that were coming across the Syrian border. My team was on the Syrian border, so we were working on that 05, 06 timeframe. And a couple guys came out, and they had a lot looser rules than we did, and they had a lot more money than we did. And they were like, yeah, but we're in the Army. And I'm like, wait a sec, so who are you? Because I was like, man, I thought I knew everybody. Who are you guys? And they wouldn't even tell me, and they were like, hey, email this guy when you get home, and we'll talk to you later.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that unit was until way after I was out.
Yeah, it's not. We don't really advertise. I mean, the unit doesn't advertise that much. They kind of find who they want. I think we've done some more blanket emailing of the whole Special Forces community or the whole NSW community now to kind of get more guys. Cause it's cool to have a super secret unit, but you still need people to like know to come to try out for it. So I think they're a little bit more upfront nowadays about getting guys to come try out for selection, but I didn't hear much about it at all. So that was my first exposure. But really I didn't plan on going to the unit until we pulled out of Iraq the second time, because I had always just wanted to stay on an ODA. Loved it. I went from weapons to intel, and then I became a warrant officer. And so as we were leaving Iraq, I was like, crap, man, like now, are we going to enter the peacetime army now? I was like, am I going to have to go sit on a staff somewhere now that I'm a warrant officer? And luckily that unit takes warrant officers. Like you can go try out. So I was like, you know what? I want to stay in the game. I'm going to go try out for this unit now. And so luckily Shannon had done 3 Iraq deployments, and she had just done an Afghanistan deployment too. And so she had tried out for the unit. So we ended up in the same class.
So would you guys have been doing, or maybe you were doing, the same job description?
Well, her job was a little more technical than mine because she had the SIGINT qualification. She had the language skills, and then Shannon was also a qualified humenter. So she was proficient in all 3 of those.
Can you go into a little more detail on human and SIGINT? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for the audience.
Yeah, so she was if you look at her Navy job, it's cryptolinguist technician, and then interpretive, which means her entire job is cryptology. So intercepting signals, radio signals, cell phone, cyber. There's a cyber aspect to it as well. So she was trained in that. But then she had the interpretive. She had the language skills as well. So she specifically targeting the Middle East, Iraq, those types of Arabic-speaking countries. That was her target language.
So SIGINT, for those listening that don't know what that is, that's signal intelligence.
Yeah, signals intelligence, exactly. Yep. So that was supposed to be her main job. When she was over in Iraq, because of basically demand, she ended up just kind of fumbling her way into source operations because she understood the Iraqi dialects so well that a lot of the guys down there at the NSW Task Force that she was working with, so the intel enablers and some of the SEALs that were ASOC guys, they realized their terps sucked because we had terps from other parts of the Middle East. They're having a really hard time. And so they were constantly having Shannon check those terps work. And so she ended up getting in on the HUMINT aspect really early on. And then this is around the same time, I think, where as a fighting force, we were having an epiphany that there was a whole other side of the population that we weren't talking to because the Middle East is just so segregated between men and women. Mm-hmm. We were missing the entire, literally female perspective. And women in that culture aren't really regarded as anything. But at the same time, they're everywhere, So you have women that are in the room with all the same bad guys we're going after. And so Shannon started working with a lot of the women's sources because the women's sources wouldn't come in and they wouldn't talk to men.
So HUMINT, for those that don't know.
Human intelligence.
It's human intelligence.
Yeah. So that's how she found her way into that. And then between one of her deployments, ended up going to one of the HUMINT courses to be, officially certified and blessed off on to run source operations.
So you guys are at selection for a special missions unit. I can't say the name. I won't say the name. But I mean, you saw her again.
I did.
So what?
Yeah.
What's your pickup line?
It was pretty wild. Well, she helped me. She everything with the unit's very cryptic. And so you go through like a 40-day selection process, which is pretty wild onto itself. And then you go back to your unit and you get orders to come to the year-long training. And they basically give you like this super random email that's just like, show up at this parking lot at this time wearing business casual or something like that. So you're like, okay, you show up and you're hanging out in this parking lot. And there's a couple guys I recognize from my selection class that are there. And there's some other people who maybe were in a class before us or behind us that are there. And then Shannon pulls up and we it's like out of a movie. We make eye contact. We both I think we recognize each other. And she's looking at me and she backs into this other car. She taps the fender of her car on another car. And she's like, ah. And so I just go over there and I'm like, hey, I saw that car jumped out and bit your bumper. Like that was my pickup line there, And then we both realized we were who we thought we were, and then we were both still in training. So we had a lot going on for that first year, but from that moment on, we were pretty much inseparable.